Hey, this is Pamela Schneider. I'm the retail editor for Blue Book Services, and this is the Produce Reporter Week in Review. Greg, got a lot of news again this week. A lot.
We do have a lot of news. And you're back, so there's two people chasing it around, which is nice.
Yeah, it's
one of my favorite stories this week we just came out with late in the week, and it actually is somewhat connected to a story you've done before. It's the news that Wendy's is making a huge investment into ghost trucks, and they're using the same company that you experienced firsthand when you did the MrBeast Burger.
Yeah, that was kind of something that you wouldn't have known if you hadn't experienced it firsthand. I was digging around trying to find a photo to go with Wendy's, fast food giant, deciding to invest in up to 700, could be more, of these ghost kitchens by 2025. And they were planning, 25 or 50 by the end of the year. But I'm looking for some art because I got to find something. And I get to the company, Reef, that they're working with, and I noticed a little something familiar. They're the same food truck company that did MrBeast Burger. And this whole ghost kitchen concept is really fascinating to me. And it shouldn't be fascinating. I mean, it shouldn't be surprising that a retailer or a food service operator like Wendy's is going into ghost kitchens. What is one of the most challenging things that fast food has right now? It's labor. It's 100% labor. And these ghost kitchens operate with one or two people in there, and they crank out food pretty quickly with very little overhead costs. So not surprising, but it is surprising to see that it was the same ghost kitchen company, because I feel like Wendy's is this giant mass-produced behemoth, and then to see that they're using the same company as something that is like this quirky new upstart kind of like trendy thing, it's like, I don't know, it's a whole man behind the curtain thing, and it's a little disturbing to me.
Well, it said that they'd done some test markets with this concept, and that's something that we'll need to look into, because I want to see exactly how that works, because a Wendy's kitchen seems quite a bit bigger than the truck we have in the photo. And right. So I don't know if it'd be limited menu. I assume it would be for delivery only, not pick up at the truck.
Right. Yeah. It's a weird experience to try to pick up at one of those trucks, especially when they're in a sketchy parking lot. There's so many unanswered questions on that, but when I saw that it was this, I'm like, is this like a food truck thing? But then I also noticed that it's something that they're expanding in the UK, and obviously there's not a whole lot of Wendy's operations in the UK. So maybe it's more of like a niche food truck area where, you've got some nostalgia for your burger from Wendy's. I mean, what is differentiated about Wendy's besides their snarky Twitter account? Nothing.
And really. Their chicken sandwiches.
Oh, I mean, the spicy chicken sandwich. That is my go-to.
Right. That was the original.
And you know what? The fries are way better than MrBeast fries. So maybe MrBeast can like tag on to some of those supplies.
But MrBeast Burger with Wendy's fries.
I have a feeling since the Wendy's truck picture was a branded Wendy's, that's all they're going to be doing. It's not going to be one of these commissary type operations where they're doing 3 or 4 different restaurants in one location. But still, I mean, the ghost kitchen thing, to have 700 of them, they could do 1,000 of them. They could do 1,500 of them, just based on what we've seen in the growth of MrBeast alone, 0 to 600 plus in 6 months. So even less than that. Wendy's could scale that up dramatically if they see a lot of savings in that. Although in my area, I will point out that Wendy's and Popeye's Kitchen, at least in the Austin, Texas area, have been just cranking out stores lately, where brand new Wendy's here, brand new Popeyes right next door. And so they're not having any trouble putting up regular locations. So I'm sure this is a targeted approach with this food truck concept.
Well, also, as we've talked about before, a lot, especially with labor situation, a lot of these restaurants are not doing dine-in.
Right.
So you don't need that big a location if you're doing takeout and delivery.
Yeah, you don't need a very big location, but I have a feeling that there's a limited space for the Frosty machine in the food truck. So that would be a bummer for me. They probably have it, but I don't know. It's very small. I just can't see that they'd be food prepping a whole lot of stuff and storing it there too, because they make all their own salads and stuff in-house at each location. And there's not a whole lot of food prep area in there, nor is there a whole lot of food storage area in those things.
True.
So it's just fascinating to see a fast food restaurant that's already got low overhead going into this concept.
Well, if they're not doing salads in there, we might not be following it as closely.
Right, yeah.
We do not cover the burger and fry industry.
Well, you know, McDonald's did pull back on salads a lot during the pandemic, just because of, I'm sure, demand, and they're just going back into some of those. So I would really be disappointed to see that if they pulled back on salads to feed the demand for burgers and fries, that would kind of make me pretty sad.
Yes.
But that's low overhead. That's shoestring budgets. Let's flip over to where we are not seeing shoestring budgets right now. They are printing cash.
Hundreds of millions of dollars are being invested in vertical greenhouses and all these controlled atmosphere. We had a handful of stories this week. One of the most interesting, I thought, was a company called 80 Acres, in which they just announced a $160 million round of investments. And there was a press release, which we have, but also their CEO gave an interview to Ag Funder News, which we're going to quote from and give our readers the link. And he said some really interesting things and stuff that you don't hear quite the honesty. He said that there will be winners and losers in this market. And he didn't really expand on that, whether he's talking about winners and losers both within the vertical tech investment, or if he's talking about losers possibly being field grown producers that are going to lose to these greenhouse companies. But then he also made a claim that his company is far above any of his peers, in the fact that they've had product in the marketplace for 4 years and they have a wider variety than any of their competitors. So clearly this segment of the industry has been raising money, and now maybe we're going to start to see a ramp up toward competitiveness against each other. Maybe they're starting to run into, talking to retailers, and they're hearing, oh yeah, we carry one of your competitors. I mean, that's what produce companies have to deal with. If these guys are getting into the market, they're going to be dealing with the same stuff.
Yeah, what shocks me is in the list of nearly 10 stories we had about vertical farming, this was not the only $100 million investment that we had this week. And the other thing about we've been growing in the market for 4 years. There's another $100 million investor that's been in the market a little bit longer than that. The Mastronardi Produce is working with AppHarvest, which is based in Moorhead, Kentucky. They've been collaborating for a while, but they announced this week that they're forming a new venture called FarmCo. And there weren't a ton of details about it, but it just seems like a very rapid expansion of what they do. And they grow, just think about all the different things that come out of Kingsville, Ontario from Mastronardi Produce. The berries and, greenhouse veg and lettuces. I'm assuming this is going to be a big deal in greens. But that was another huge investment this week.
They're aiming for 750 acres of controlled atmosphere. I mean, that makes a big dent in the market. I mean, the greenhouse companies in Leamington have been factors in the market at 10s and 20s of acres. And so this is a massive investment. And absolutely, Mastronardi Company has been doing this a long time. So they are not new to this market, and they clearly see this as a good investment and a good partner.
Yeah, and more partnerships that we saw this week, Calera, and they're relatively new, but they also have a lot of big names on their board, including former Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue. They just partnered up with a Germany-based controlled atmosphere farming company that has operations in the Middle East, in Europe, all over the world, it looks like. There was another collaboration. What were some of the other ones that we saw? There's too many to remember. We had to have a list. You wrote the list.
One of the most interesting ones was Howling, which has been in the business for a long time, and they're changing their name to the Longvine Growing Co. And I mean, that is big news to people in our industry. But the bigger news in this story is they're not farming anymore in their greenhouse in California because the owner of the greenhouse has sold it to somebody else. Who did they sell it to? That's kind of
they kind of buried the lead in there, huh? They're growing cannabis now. One of the larger.
They sold it to a cannabis company who is taking advantage of the laws in California and are going to have a massive investment in cannabis. And who gets kicked to the curb? The tomatoes.
Right. But the reason they're still growing. The Howling operation in Utah is continuing to grow veg. Not surprising they don't grow cannabis in Utah, do they?
I don't believe it's legal in Utah, but right next door in Colorado it is.
Yeah, for sure. But to see that, that was a little bit of burying the lead, but it reminded me of a recent quarterly report from Village Farms, where Village Farms has been doing a lot in the cannabis industry in Canada so far, but they look like they're laying the groundwork, and they've spoken about laying the groundwork for cannabis in Texas, which I'm not sure that that's going to happen anytime soon. But to see that a lot of these companies are starting to look toward pivoting their vegetable operations into cannabis, they're laying the groundwork. And this is something that I thought for a while. When I saw Mastronardi go into Colorado a while ago, I was like, I wonder if they're going to continue to grow to Colorado, or if they're going to sell their stuff to cannabis growers. And there was a lot of investment that went into Colorado at first, and then some have converted over to cannabis and some have not. And it's a back and forth, but to see that this California grower has switched over, I think is kind of a sit up and take notice of what's going on with vegetables versus cannabis, but in the controlled environment agriculture thing in general. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars of investment going in there. And where is the market demand for all of this stuff? They've got to be pushing real hard to build that demand among retailers and in food service.
Well, part of the argument for these is they're bringing them to more areas of the country so that they can supply local markets. And if you're not in one of those local markets, then you're probably not going to see it as much. Speaking of local markets, one of the companies, AeroFarms, just announced that they're going to expand into St. Louis, which is in the same state as I am. So would that be local to make a 3.5-hour drive across the state to get to Kansas City? I would consider it local.
It's more local than California or
Arizona. More local than any field-grown greens that I can get from anywhere.
Yeah, unless it's a tiny little like farmer's market niche kind of place that's growing in high tunnels or something like that.
Yeah, well, I've already done the rip on the local farmer's market. I did try one again last week, the local farmer's market, and got a Missouri grown watermelon, which was excellent, but it was still 3 times more than the Texas watermelon at Hy-Vee or Aldi. Was it 3 times better? No, it was local. Local doesn't work if it's 3 times more.
Right. You know what though? I've got, and actually it's not 3 times more. I'm going to do a cantaloupe test pretty soon down here. And down here in my kitchen, last week it got scrapped because I just bought a new fridge and it froze them. Okay. So it made me mad. But HEB has been having all these different melons lately. And they put some of it in a branded net bag. That's an HEB brand. But then I'm that lady who will stand in the produce department and tell people, oh, no, you don't want that cantaloupe. I got the Pecos ones right over here for 50 cents more. And they're amazing, amazing, amazing cantaloupes. So the boys and I, if I can get Ike to eat them, he doesn't like melon right now, are going to try some of the melons, some of the funky branded ones, and then the regular one that they normally have. And then my darling favorite that they have only this time of year. And I buy as many of them as I can tolerate, the Pecos cantaloupe. Yeah, I mean, local at its finest, but Pecos is really far from Austin.
Texas is pretty big.
Yeah. You know what though? They have hydroponic strawberries at my HEB now too, and that's something else I wanted to mention. But they came from Leamington, so it's not exactly local. Not local at all. Not even close to local. I don't even know why we have them, but they're pretty good.
Same continent.
Yeah. I'm not getting strawberries from another continent. On that note, you should go to producebluebook.com, sign up for the Produce Reporter newsletter so you can keep up with the CEA news. Apparently that's a lot of what we cover, but there's so much more. We just have only so much time and only so much attention span. So thank you for making it to the end of the Produce Reporter Week in Review. Sign up for the Produce Reporter at producebluebook.com. All right. And I put my art up here that Uli made for me.
Well, I've got my kid art, my golf course.
Well, I had to put it up because he's finally at school today, first day of school. I got to go pick him up, you know, just to have a little reminder of him sitting in my armpit all summer while I'm trying to work.